to the M6P Back to Books. I'm Darrin, and I am here with Jared, Kevin, and John. And tonight we are going to be discussing Marvel's Inferno. So, John, lead us off with a little bit about what this is about.
Yeah, burn, baby, burn. X-Men Inferno is a 1989 comic book crossover. It took place in the following titles: X-Terminators, which we will talk about in great length, 1 through 4. That was by Louise Simonson and John Bogdanoff. The regular Uncanny X-Men 239 through 243 by Claremont and Mark Silvestri was doing the art at that time. X Factor 33 through 40 was on our reading list. So we kind of started with X Factor. These titles all cross over. X Factor was Louise Simonson again with her husband Walt Simonson, and the New Mutants 71 through 73 by Louise Simonson and Brett Blevins. So basically the story starts in New Mutants, X-Terminators, and that's where you get Limbo coming to Earth through the demons Sim and Nastir, who the whole time I was reading I always called him Nostrish. I saw an S that wasn't there for 20 years until I read it this last time, and I'm like, oh, Nastir is that demon's name. He's the one that comes to Earth. He kind of looks like a horse, and their plan is to get 13 babies, which is where X Factor comes in, because Nathan Christopher Summers is one of the babies they want to capture, to make a pentagram in the sky to open up the hell, which is called Limbo in this series. Limbo had been ruled by magic. Now it's ruled by Sim. So there's a lot of tie-ins from all of the X-Men series before this into this. And we haven't even gotten to the big part, which is Madeline Pryor and Mr. Sinister. That's the X-Men theme that's going through here. Madeline Pryor had been left by her husband Cyclops because he heard that his old flame was back alive. So he went running back to her, leaving him and the baby to fend for themselves. So then you have lots of villains in this one. You've got the demons. You've got Mr. Sinister. You've got Madeline becoming the Goblin Queen because she realizes all of this terrible things have been done to her. And she makes a deal with these demons that are on Earth from Limbo. Let me pause for a sip of water here as I think of all the more things that are happening in the X-Men's Inferno.
As a kid, did any of y'all ever sit down with like your mom or your grandma when they were watching soap operas and have them try to explain the storyline to you? That's what's going on right now.
Well, that's what this is, because it's one big X-Men soap opera. So, yeah, there's a lot going on in this one. We'll get to it. We'll talk about it. Just for an overview, this was coming off. This is the Outback era of X-Men. So the X-Men are presumed dead while this is going on. This is the first time meeting Jean Grey and X Factor, for the first time them two really coming together since X Factor started. There were other crossover events while X Factor was around, but they never really met with the X-Men until right here back at the big climactic ending at Xavier's mansion, when they all meet up with Mr. Sinister, fight him to his seeming death. But we all know that that won't last because it's comics. So that's a little brief rundown of what we got going on here, but we could talk it into pieces and break it down a little bit, starting with X-Terminators, which I know is Kevin's favorite.
The greatest comic I've ever read. Yeah.
You might need an exterminator. We got one flying around your head. I've been watching it this whole time, Kevin. Just keep an eye out. It's green. Whoa!
There you go.
Oh, wow. Took care of that. All righty. Exterminator.
I live in the South, man. This is just Monday.
Yeah, we're from Ohio. We grab bugs too when they are. It's fun. Okay. So yeah, a lot to take in. So the exterminators. This is my first little
I'm going to need another beer to talk about exterminators. Sorry. Okay.
My first little introduction to them. And right off the bat, like, yeah, very cartoony, a lot of product placement. It was the 80s, a lot of peps, you know. But what really struck me was like how dark this whole series was. It was very adult themes and stuff. And then you get to the exterminators, and you got Taki running around turning his wheelchair into a helicopter, or you know, the demons are asking him to make a machine that can make a magic spell for them. It's like, when did Taki suddenly become you know, very important to the storyline? But it just, I don't know if Louise Simonson was just overworked because she was writing all of them except for the X-Men, but it just seemed like the yeah, Exterminators is just, I did not like it, just a lot going on. I get it, they're new characters. I got to give it a chance and read on and read on. I kept reading on and reading on and giving them chances, but it's still just, that was my least favorite part if I have to really nitpick this series.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of if you read X-Men Mutant Massacre, it was a really great storyline, but the Power Pack issues just seemed like they didn't fit. It just seemed a little off. And so Inferno definitely had all the makings of what could have been a good story, but I think starting off with Exterminators kind of being the foundation and where it goes, it never was able to get off, and the greatness of what it could have been just wasn't realized.
Yeah, before we let Kevin talk about Exterminators, I'll just give my 2 cents. I agree with you guys. I previously read Inferno through like this essential, and I didn't read the Exterminators. I kind of didn't know what was going on. There was just demons in New York. I had read several of the tie-ins. They kind of Inferno tied in not only to what we read, but anything in 1989, the first half of 1989 that was going on in Marvel, basically crossed over. The Avengers had Inferno. I think the and Franklin Richards was one that was captured at some point too. So it tied into the Fantastic Four. Or actually, I think that was with the Avengers. I think those were the issues that Reed and Sue were actually Avengers for like 2 issues. Daredevil I had read. Spider-Man, that cool Mysterio cover by Todd McFarlane. That's an Inferno crossover. So I didn't know why this was happening. So sadly, you have to read the Exterminators to understand what's going on. Why is this demon? And like Darrin said, it's cartoony, and it is super cartoony. It's super juvenile. And then they're like, but we're going to capture 13 babies and sacrifice them to the gods in the sky in the shape of a pentagram. I'm like, you were just making like very juvenile jokes, and then you go to that. It's quite the juxtaposition. But let's hear from a guy that liked it, named Kevin.
Yeah, so I've tried to read Inferno, I think at least 4 times before. Like, and I've always had the big giant trade, and I think this is the first time that I actually powered through it, and I could never read it because of the Exterminators. It's just one of the worst written series, and on top of that, I don't want to jump ahead, but the art in the first 2 issues of the New Mutants is horrible too, and that's a really good artist. And I mean, like, the 3rd issue, the completion of the Ileana saga, great art in that one, same artist, but in the first 2 issues, it's just so miserable. So, like, just to start off, like, you really have to like just eat your veggies first, and they're not good veggies. They're not cooked right. It's horrible writing, juvenile writing, and I realize that this series is like Power Packs. It's for kids. I think that's the target audience, but I can't imagine a 6-year-old kid just deciding that this is the jumping off point of of comics where they want to get into it. I think most kids that were into it at the time were already into Spider-Man, or already into X-Men, or already into the Avengers. You didn't need this kind of kiddie tie-in, um, especially to such a mature subject matter that this entire series, tackles or tries to tackle. Um, and Taki is a low rent Forge. Like, he's a nonsensical Forge. He can just, where Forge can create anything he can imagine, Taki can just make anything. He doesn't even have to imagine it. There's no, it doesn't even really have any skill the way Forge does. Like, Forge still has skills. Taki, he just touches stuff. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It's his entire power set really irritates me. Yeah, and I don't think that helps. The rest of them are fine, whatever. But yeah, I think he's the big irritant for me.
Why'd they keep showing Boom Boom's granny panties? Like they were showing that too in the kids' comic, The Exterminators. A lot. I was
Yeah.
just like, penny panties.
Yeah, there
I
was
just
some
watched a YouTube video that
inappropriateness
pointed that out earlier.
with the young ex-women for sure. But I think everybody else from the Exterminators came from X Factor, because X Factor was like Ghostbusters for mutants under Cameron Hodge, right? And they saved those mutants, and then they just like, oh, we need one even younger, more annoying than all of these tertiary characters that nobody cares about. Let's make this guy who can magically, like you said, Forge has to put in the work. He can figure it out in his brain, but then he's got to screw in the bolts and make the machine. Taki just touches it, and now my wheelchair can fly 7 people around Manhattan. So yeah.
It seemed like half the time Taki didn't even know what he was going to create, and then other times he's like, "I can just create this." But then, like early on, it's just maybe because his powers are getting a little more honed, but it's just like, "Oh, whoa! It created a whole yada yada," and then later on, he's just like, "Oh, I can create whatever," and yeah, it just seemed
Right.
like too easy just to fix things and further the
And
story.
now, are you guys more familiar with the New Mutants? Did you kind of know what was going on there when you read this series, or were these kind of the only New Mutants? The only New Mutants comics I read were the ones that crossed over like this one, and then into I think Extinction Agenda. They cross over with the New Mutants. So those are the only my real experience before X-Force. I don't know if you guys knew more about Magic and Limbo and all of that going into this, or is this kind of your introduction?
Yeah, that was, well, part of it is even outside of the crossover, there's so much from New Mutants that you need to know in order to, why are the demons, why are they like why do they have like all the computer pieces? Well, that's because Warlock went to Limbo and infected them with the transmode virus. So they're part technology, part demonic. But nothing is ever said. You're just like,
Right.
oh wow, why is Sim like that now? And John,
Yeah.
I've always called him Naastreth. I've always added a th at the end. So I'm with you in trying to figure out how
Right.
to say
Right. That H
his
doesn't,
name.
right. It doesn't go by itself,
It's like what Fabian Nicieza or whatever. Like nobody can pronounce his last name. Yeah.
And with the New Mutants too, you have to look at, so when you think about Inferno, we think it's an X-Men set eccentric event and it's all about Madeline Pryor. The X-Men don't really do a whole lot. They
Oh,
don't show up
Yeah.
into the end. The whole thing of Inferno is based upon Magic not closing up her portal. She opened it up and all the demons came. It really isn't about Madeline Pryor animating the garbage can and the garbage truck and stuff. So I know we might get into it later, but I kind of liked how X-Men 97 made it succinct and whole. I wouldn't have wanted this whole thing. I wouldn't want 16 episodes of this.
No, you're right. Because I think we all came to the same conclusion. Very slow build up here. And maybe we'll talk about how much we liked it more going on when we finally do get into the main mutants. But these characters, I'm not a big New Mutants guy, definitely not an Exterminators guy. So getting through these and the lesser artworks that come with them, uh, that was a little bit tough for
The
me.
the the breath of life in terms of the reading order is that, and this is really interesting to me, is the X Factor issues that are placed in the reading order, especially when you get the collected edition, but it's the same writer. So it's really interesting to me. And I don't even think the New Mutant issues are poorly written. They're well written. It's just you have to have a lot of that back knowledge. So it's interesting to me that such a good writer as Louise Simonson wrote Externals. It feels so hackneyed.
No,
I was
she is good. She is a good writer. I feel like she's probably better in X Factor because she's working with another great writer who happens to be the artist who happens to be her husband, Walt Simonson. So that may be a better sounding board and a better working relationship, and maybe her ideas come through better with somebody, or they maybe use the Marvel method a little bit there. They're at home all day together. What do you think of this? Probably the best situation for a writer and artist to be in.
I didn't
But
even think of that. That's a really good point.
yeah. So yeah,
Oh.
then when we move on, the X Factor stuff is right. That's kind of more what the cartoon was based on too, where we get Nathan Summers, who was actually, it seems like he was Christopher Summers for all of it, and I kind of didn't notice that until I've seen some of the memes based on the cartoons. She says, "Let's call him Nathan." Nathan is also Mr. Sinister's real name, so it's interesting that they choose that to be. I guess it's his middle name, but that's what they're calling him. His name is Christopher Nathan Summers. Is that correct? Or am I wrong?
believe so.
I believe that's what they
I think that's how it worked, because I was
said
little
in
when it was
this
like, oh, they're
series.
calling him Nathan, all of a
Yeah.
sudden, and
So, but I mean, this is trying to resolve the worst thing that they ever did to Cyclops, and maybe the best, depending on your opinion. Cyclops was he was a hero. He was a by the book Captain America type of the X-Men. And then he just went and left his wife and child because behind the scenes they wanted to make X Factor and they didn't know how to do it. I could tell reading this that Chris Claremont did not seem to me that he wanted Madeline Pryor to be the Goblin Queen. Like, she's in the X-Men books, she's more sympathetic than in the other books where she's a nasty Goblin Queen, like a nasty woman, to quote people. But no, she is a demon, right? And she's evil for evil's sake, and she loves it, and she loves being bad. But in the X-Men book, she's like still a human, sympathetic character, not just a clone with a demon soul or something like that. Did you guys get that, or am I reaching?
I'm still holding on to the nasty woman comment. That was really good.
yeah.
I started reading the Outback X-Men, and now I'm back. That's why all the way up to like the Jim Lee X-Men era now. But she was part of that team. She was just kind of like their Forge or whatever. She was good with the computers. And because of that transmode virus, they reached out, Sim was reaching out to her through the X-Men's computer in the basement and kind of infecting her mind that way prior to this. No pun intended. But when she becomes the Goblin Queen, I feel like if it was up to Chris Claremont, she would have redeemed herself at the end, or maybe it seemed even at part, okay, Madeline Pryor's got powers. Is she going to be good? Is she going to be bad? Well, she turned out bad. I think now in the comics, she's even more of a good, or part of, obviously all the mutants are together, but she's like back with Havoc, how she was tempting him throughout this series too. So I think she is an interesting character, but I think she's an interesting character when Chris Claremont's writing her, not as much when Louise Simonson is. Then she's just the villain of the week.
And that's the tough part with her whole character is Chris never intended her to be a clone of Jean Grey. He intended Jean to be dead, Cyclops to find a redhead that looked similar to her, so that then
Right.
he could do those stories like From the Ashes when you think that Dark Phoenix comes back because Mastermind is there and that kind of stuff. But his intention in all his interviews says they have the baby and they go off, and Cyclops isn't with the X-Men anymore, and you don't see him anymore. This is Wolverine and Storm and Colossus and Rogue and Phoenix. Those are the X-Men. Cyclops lives happily ever after. The editorial said, no. That's not what it's going to be. And I think he really just did the best that he could. But yeah, you can definitely tell that he sympathized with her because that's not what he intended her to be. This is not the Madeline that I wrote. She was just this loving human that Cyclops meets. She's a pilot, and my character, Jean, her story is done. She's dead. Cyclops, his story continues, but we don't read about that anymore. He didn't really want X Factor either. What do you mean?
No.
Oh, and now Jean is back. He thought it was going to be Dazzler. Well, that got canned real quick. I digress.
Right. No, but all excellent points, Jay. That's what the initial writer wanted, but comics are business, and there are people that tell you what to write or what the story is going to be or what the issue is going to be, but that you don't own any of your characters in Marvel. You just write it's your your sandbox, but not your toys kind of thing. Somebody else can take them and play with them if they want. So, well, what about Mr. Sinister? This was our very first Mr. Sinister not our very first, but this was the first big story and the reveal and a lot of drama with him in the orphanage. And he ran the orphanage where the Summers brothers were there, and he let them take Alex, but he kept Scott close by. Scott Summers' powers, or Cyclops' powers, obviously very effective against Mr. Sinister for some reason, but not you know, there was a lot going on there. So what do you guys think of Mr. Sinister? I'm sorry.
I'll go ahead first. I enjoyed, for the most part, because the X-Men issues were my favorite of this, all these. It was cool. I liked a lot of the dialogue of Sinister, you know, especially towards some of the earlier X-Men issues in it. Claremont really knew how to nail that. I think we did that post of Sinister from Inferno a while back on the page, and like some people were pointing that out, like, oh, that's definitely Claremont there and everything, you know, how many bubbles he could fit on a page and everything. But I enjoyed reading them all. Sinister was an interesting character. Towards the end, I kind of started to get a little worn out, like, okay, he keeps coming back, but I just thought this whole issue was like I mean, the villains kind of started to get on my nerves, all of them, from Neastra, or however you say his name, and Sim, and then Goblin. She just would not stop talking about why she was mad. Like, it's like, oh, you're going to tell us again. Tell us why you're so angry at everyone. It just seemed like that, like a lot. And then Sinister finally, it just, the whole lineup with the villains and everything, not to get off Sinister, but how he was connected to them all, that was just kind of like, just wanted to see more of Sinister, but this is fine, I suppose. And I guess, I mean, yeah, he almost didn't, like, he wasn't even almost necessary to the storyline. They just, like, I mean, in a weird way, I know that he created the clone and everything, but had we not known that or anything, I think the story with the Goblin Queen and you know, Limbo and everything, that could have worked possibly.
Yeah, I don't think he had really any direct connection to the demons at all, or right? There was not, I mean,
As far as I know.
yeah, he just made Madeline and came back to check on her. I guess.
She got powerful
Then the
and got really
Marauders
villainous. Yeah. And he's like, oh, I
Marauders
noticed you.
didn't do much in this one. The Marauders are a cool group of villains, but we didn't get a lot of great moments from them in this. There was, you know, again, one of the X-Men issues, and I agree with Darrin, the X-Men were my favorite issues of this. The X-Factor, close behind, but I liked Silvestri's art more than I'm a fan of Walt Simonson's art style anyway for the X-Factor. If he's drawing Thor, he can't do wrong, but with the X-Factor, he's good, but not my favorite.
Yeah, I love the X-Men issues. I think they just stand miles apart from the rest of the stuff. You could just start at the X-Men issues and say, okay, this is Inferno for me. I can read a summary, a real quick Google summary or something about the first 37 issues that I had to read before I got here. But this is what I want to see. I want to see my X-Men, you know, Wolverine in a demonic, like, claw mask, Storm and Rogue with the pointy hair out to here, fighting Mr. Sinister, the X-Mansion blows up. This is what I wanted to pay my 75 cents or my buck for as a kid with a comic book. I just didn't want to read about a bunch of teenagers in yellow and black costumes fighting demons poorly drawn. You know, the last issues with the X-Men just blow the rest of the series out of the water.
So I'm going to pull a Jonathan May here, and I don't want to be controversial, or I'm not meaning to be controversial, but rereading this series, I've really come to the conclusion as a writer, and as a script writer, like specifically the words you're reading on the page, I'm not a big fan of Chris Claremont. I think his plots are great. I think his stories that he constructs are great, but something about his writing, it's so overwritten. It's very repetitive. And I don't think it's necessarily the writing of the time, because at the same time, you know, Peter David is writing The Incredible Hulk at the same time. And I absolutely love that run, and I love Peter David's writing. But that was like one thing that really struck out to me is is the exterminators were hard to get through, but I got really tired reading the X-Men issues. Just something about his writing does not click with me. I'm not going to call him a bad writer because he's obviously a great and famous and talented writer, but just his writing just does not work for me. I don't know what it is. I found it very hard to read his stuff, even after the Exterminators. So that's my controversial take. Sorry, guys.
But it is interesting. It is an interesting take. I wouldn't say you're even wrong. He does definitely repeat himself a lot, and he uses a lot more words that are like, if I'm reading comics at night before I go to bed, okay, Marvel Unlimited, it's Monday. I'm going to read 3 new issues and then 1 issue of the old X-Men. And that 1 issue of the old X-Men, I'll get halfway through and I will fall asleep. But I'll have read the 3 issues, and half the time it took me to read this new 1 issue because they just don't. I mean, there's dialogue boxes on top of words on top of. I do think why, because Frank Miller would do this a lot, and a lot of, I don't know if Peter David did it during his Hulk run. That's one I haven't gotten through yet. But before there was the Jonathan Hickman page, or I think Joe Kelly introduced it in Deadpool, where it was just like previously in this comic, you had to incorporate that into your story of here's what happened last issue. This is its own separate issue. We're going to tell you. And Frank Miller said he did it on purpose. He said, every comic that I write could be some kid's first comic that he picks up, and he doesn't know who Daredevil is. So I tell his origin within the first 5 pages of every comic in that Daredevil run. So because you saw me stumble through the intro of what we were trying to get through here, Chris Claremont's also trying to do that to an extent in this X-Men comic that he's been written at this point through probably about 14 years or so, 15 years. What did he do? 17 years altogether. This is near the end of that. And a lot of this is tying up a lot of those loose ends, like we were talking about with Cyclops, his child, his family, them finally reuniting with the X Factor, which he probably put off on purpose. He probably, like we said, he doesn't like X Factor. He didn't like that idea. That wasn't his comic. So he never featured them in the X-Men until this storyline. So that's my defense of Chris Claremont without saying that Kevin's wrong. Yeah, everybody's entitled to their opinion. I really enjoy his X-Men. I don't think this is his high mark of the run. I say, obviously from Dark Phoenix and then even the Brood saga and the original, those are to me the ones that stand out as better than this. But at that time, you're only working with 1 comic book too. So you didn't have to cross over and deal with other writers and what they're saying. And he probably had a lot less from the top too, telling him what to do. He got to do what he wanted to do.
And that would
Then
make
again, I never
sense
read.
because I enjoy those earlier issues a lot. Like I
Mhm.
enjoyed the Brood saga, I enjoy the Dark Phoenix saga, I enjoy the all new, all different X-Men. I really enjoy that stuff. So that may make sense that I'm just like I'm not worried about the baggage. I know the baggage. But again, Dave, what is it? Dave Michelini,
Yeah.
writing Spider-Man at the time. Peter David, they're doing the same thing, but yeah, maybe they don't have the baggage at this point in time that Chris Claremont does. So maybe that's my issue.
Well, John, it's
Right.
interesting you bring up, Claremont is 15 years into his X-Men run. In 2 years, we've got X-Men #1 with the blue and gold teams, but this seems like it's 10 years earlier. It just doesn't seem like that so much happens to get them there, and then in another year we're at an animated series. It just seems like there's so much time squeezed into those 2 or 3 years there.
Well, X-Men did go bi-monthly for a while, but none of them were good. Really, not that they weren't good, but that was probably the worst part of the Claremont run, because after the Outback era, but before this, right up until the Extinction Agenda, I would say, the X-Men, you had probably 20 issues where there weren't even X-Men. There was
Yeah.
just like Forge and Banshee are in this issue, and here's Storm as a kid with some new guy in Cairo, Illinois, and then it was just meandering and all over the place until basically that's why X-Men #1 people part of it were old X-Men fans that said, "Oh, good, they're putting a team of superheroes together again, and they're going to be great." We haven't seen this in quite a long time. So, but you're right, and it's Jim Lee's art. I mean, I read and I like Mark Silvestri, and Jim Lee's not. He's one of my favorite artists. I am noticing some flaws in his work now, not technically, but just everybody's a straight shot, like how we're looking now. There's not really too many. He's not a dynamic artist, or he can't tell a story like John Byrne or Jack Kirby, but he technically has some of the best covers and some of the coolest looking images in comics, and the stylization of that is way different than what it was 2 years prior to that. And I think the editors fought that. They always hated, you have to keep everything within the panel. You have to keep and some of his work, it is hard to read too. With Claremont's, all of his words in Jim Lee's dynamic art, it's like, which word is this panel in? I don't even know. So, but it's good, but it just takes a little effort. So you're right. It's okay. I don't know. What do we think of Inferno as a whole then? I guess is the big question. What are your big takeaways?
I won't be reading it again anytime soon. I'm not gonna lie. I trucked through like 10 issues today to finish it, and that was a chore. It felt like a chore more. It really felt like a chore. I just gonna be honest. We've done a lot of different episodes here on B2B covering different stuff, and this was the one that felt like a chore more so than, and none of the others felt like that. And I mean, I don't want to there are some things I definitely like about it. Obviously, some of the things that we talked about. I liked obviously the X-Men scenes, and I thought Colossus was great in this. I thought Archangel's storyline was great in this. There's definitely a lot of positives and stuff, but overall, it was just so long, so much going on back and forth. And to you guys' point, there was a lot of history before this that if you didn't know all that coming into some of these titles, it made it even more confusing to a degree. So I'm just kind of like, that's where I'm at with it.
Right. What about you, Jared? What was your final takeaway or overall takeaway, we'll call it?
I hadn't read this in 20 years. I remember reading this in college, and it was good, but then reading it now, with all the wisdom I have now, it just didn't stand up. Like it's kind of, to me, it was very reminiscent of Neverending Story. I loved that movie when I was a kid, loved it. But I know if I go back and watch it, it's not going to be the same for me. I'll still cry when the horse is going in the mud, but I know that the rest of it is not going to stand up. So it's probably good to not read it, but to keep those memories of, man, I remember reading Inferno in college and that was fun. But I also take up Darrin on his point. There were some really good spots in it. There definitely were some highlights. This is the first time that we find out Angel's new name is Archangel. Beast gave him that name, and that has stuck since 1989. That has been his name. The plot points with Magic, she's just been such a tragic character since she was even created, and you just see some big chunks of that tragedy in this, and to see Colossus open up the Darkchild armor, and Magic is now Liana, and she's 6 years old again, and she grabs him, and like, wow, that's really striking. And the stuff with Cyclops and Sinister, it lays the foundation for basically the next 30 years of stories with those characters. There's a lot of foundational stuff that we still see today that's going on. Like you said, John, Madeline is back. Madeline's story was done there, and now Madeline is back. There's a whole new portion. I never thought I'd see her animated and on a kid's cartoon either. So there were a lot of things that come out of it that, even though the story itself probably wasn't necessarily a top 10 X-Men story for me, a top 20 X-Men story, I'll keep that nostalgia, and I'll keep those jumping off pieces to kind of carry me through.
Okay. So I don't want to make it sound like this is the worst thing I've ever read. It's definitely not. Exterminators is close. It really is, but the rest of it isn't. If you like Claremont stuff, I think the the overall plot is interesting. If you're an X-Men fan, I think this is an important storyline to read. To piggyback off of what Jared said, that last episode or that last issue that tied in with the New Mutants was fantastic. Like the emotional arc of Ileana, that I thought that was great. I think that was the high point for me of this entire series personally. Um, but other than that, I mean, like X Factor, Uncanny, the art is beautiful, even if you don't, want to read every single word that Claremont and Louise writes down. I think that's fine. I think the art is worth looking at, bare, at a bare minimum. So that's my takeaway. Stay away from exterminators. There's no hope there.
Well said, Kevin. Well said. Yeah, I think we are in agreement. It's probably average to above average X-Men fare at best, and it starts out below average and it works its way into a medium speed of okayness. Maybe some cool moments. They were tying a lot together. Like you said, the Ilyana saga, that was the whole thing. She was in the early Claremont issue, she was, Colossus' 7-year-old sister. And then she dropped into limbo and came back, and now she's his teenage sister. What happened? Well, they go into that a lot in these New Mutants stories. They're wrapping that up. The whole Cyclops, Jean Grey, Madeline Pryor. They're wrapping up all of that stuff together. There is a lot going on, and so that's why it's almost like an important read as an X-Men fan, but it's not the coolest, most fun read at all. So yeah, it was okay. It was good. I read it. I know what was going on. Like as a kid, I said most of my first introduction was through Daredevil. That was the first comic I read, and it was a little bit after this, but I went back and these were the closest back issues I could find when it was John Romita Jr. and Ann Nocenti doing Daredevil, and I just didn't know why the fire hydrants were talking and everybody was mad at each other and kind of demon-like, and Daredevil was just kind of crazy. That's not really a good series for a kid to start reading. Ann Nocenti, John Romita, Daredevil. If you get a chance to hook one of your kids on comics, don't start with that one. But it worked for me somehow, some way. I don't know. Anyways, I'm digressing. Yeah. Well, what did you guys think of the X-Men 97 episode that ties in? Were you happy with that episode? Did they do this justice? Did they improve upon a okay story? Did you watch it, Kevin?
I actually did. I didn't even know we were going to talk about it, and I actually watched it. I'll go ahead and give my thoughts. I thought it was a fantastic episode. Probably because there's only been 4 so far, right? So I think that one definitely is my favorite. There's a lot of anime references. I felt to Akira, like the movie Akira, as I was watching it, and I really enjoyed those anime references, like as the demons like blossom, and just what they do, like the teddy bear. It just really reminded me of Akira and hit like double nostalgia for me because I'm watching X-Men 97, but then like the very first anime that I ever actually really liked and enjoyed, those two things kind of clicking together. I thought it was a lot of fun. Um, I I don't think it was the greatest retelling of this story for a 30-minute long version. I think it does
Right.
its job, and I think it's a very good episode. But I think if that episode piques your interest, yeah, maybe go back and read through some of the Uncanny and X Factor issues.
Yeah, for me, I'm gonna go with what Jared mentioned earlier and what Kevin just did now. That like for 30 minutes and everything, to condense it and everything. I mean, I was happy. I actually, Inferno is one I had not read, so I saw the X-Men 97 episode first. Believe it or not, I probably read some bits and pieces when I was younger and don't recall. But I just, yeah, I enjoyed the X-Men 97 episode. It wasn't anything super spectacular, but they fit a lot, a lot of story into that 30 minutes. And although it is very different, I think it, for the most part, paid tribute to the comic series. It was fairly true to it. So
Yeah, I thought it was good. I think it could have been 5 to 10 minutes longer. I think there are parts of the episode that felt a little bit rushed. And when we really look at it, the whole Madeline thing was started and wrapped in one episode.
yeah,
Outside of episode 2, where where the real Jean knocks at the door. Definitely could have continued that plot point a little bit longer through the show, even into another episode. But for the most part, I loved how they were able to take the monsters and everything and make them in the mansion. It was just self-contained there in the mansion. We didn't need to do the whole city and talking garbage trucks. And it was cool how they did a little homage with Ileana. She was in her New Mutants outfit, and then she was Dark Child, and that was all from Morph. And I'm really okay with them not having an explanation of how did Morph know that? Did he ever see, let's just have some fun. It was just a good time. I think that episode was a lot of fun. You didn't know what was going to be outside of the elevator or what was real and what wasn't. Sinister shows up. That was like the meat and potatoes of that series. We didn't need Taki to swing in on a wheelchair, and we didn't need to meet Sim. That stuff just wasn't important. I think they boiled it down to the main parts with a huge cast. I mean, this cast is big, and they took a couple people off the plate for that episode too. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I agree. I think again, we're on the same page here. It's if you had just read the X-Men issues straight and you didn't read any of the tie-ins, you would get something pretty close to this, because we're just talking about Mr. Sinister and Madeline Pryor. There's none of the demons besides just as kind of a background effect almost, and I don't know why or how she controls demons, but apparently she does. So don't worry about it. And the time thing is a bigger issue because it's like, I guess part of her, as Claremont explains, page after page and paragraph after paragraph of why she is so upset about Cyclops leaving her, abandoning her. She's left all alone. Nobody loves her, blah, blah, blah. All of those things happened for like 5 minutes to this Madeline Gray, right? Like she went in the other room and they're all like, oh, we like Jean. She's the one. And then she turned into a demonic goblin queen because of 5 minutes of being ignored. Whereas the other one was literally abandoned for months and years in real time and months in comic book time. So the story could use a little bit more brewing. Maybe they could have brought back this Jean, had a different episode, and then have Goblin Queen come back later. But it was fine. Tell it all in one. That's a minor knock, but the same as everybody.
Well, you know how you knew who the real Jean was? Do you know how you knew who the real Jean was?
Yeah, because she fainted as soon as she came to the door.
That's all I wanted to make sure was said.
Yes.
to all your point, it probably could have been like 2 episodes, maybe just 2,
Right.
because it seems like it was so huge and such a mass event in the comics that was one of those things that just to stretch it out a little bit more, just do a 2-parter. I mean, you think they would have done a 2-parter or for this back in the day, if the original animated series, I feel like they would have done this in 2 episodes, but maybe not.
Well, that was a great point, because I said that
yeah.
Extinction Agenda was huge. Like that was like a 12 to 16 part series, and they wrapped that up real quick. They just sent Storm and Gambit and Jubilee to the island, and then they were done. Like, we're good to go. But also, they were just under a lot of different pressure. Like, we have 1 season to tell the best X-Men episodes. Inferno did not make the cut. Extinction Agenda, you get 1 episode, because we got to have this episode with Wolverine up in Canada fishing. So we got to make sure we have time for that, and we get to Extinction Agenda. But I think with this,
I feel like they're going to come back to Genosha. I think they're hinting at that. I mean, by the time this comes out or we're watching, who knows what the next episodes may be. But I felt like I heard some talk about Genosha in a couple of the episodes, that it's still out there. But because was that the first season? That was the only time?
Episode 4 hinted at it.
That's what I thought.
Just really reminded you, like, hey, do you guys remember this storyline? You remember this episode? So yeah, I agree with you. Yeah.
And
Because
Magneto
I know
took the
this season,
Morlocks to Genosha. You remember in the first episode, he said that's where he was sending them. Callisto and
yes.
the Morlocks were headed to Genosha.
So I'm wondering if that's part of the big three. The last three episodes are one big story, or they all have the same title, part 1, 2, and 3. It'll be odd if that's not one big story. But I forget what the name of that is, but it may be something similar to the Extinction Agenda. It could be anything. It could be
Are we
Age of
gonna get
Apocalypse. We don't know.
Cassandra Nova? Is that
Yeah.
they gonna do that storyline for
no.
a
That ended
kid's
Genosha
television
for
show?
real. Yeah. It just
Because I will say I do like how they cleaned up the Goblin Queen's outfit for a kid's cartoon. So
Mhm.
yeah, I was wondering how they were going to do that because that's always I remember my mom commenting on that when I bought comics back in the day. So
Uh, some very you know interesting covers.
yeah, and I couldn't show her. Well, Mom, look at Havoc. He's worse. But yeah, she didn't care.
Yeah.
he was. All right. Is any final thoughts from anybody, or what do we think?
I just want to drop one random thing in there that one of my favorite moments is when the mailbox eats the mailman and Wolverine attacks the mailbox and like slashes it open, and it's just a piece of mail with the guy on his face on it, or the mailman. It's like, what is this? Like, I love that.
There were so many murders, or I don't even know what, like they were, oh, this guy's it's a guy that's a demon, but Wolverine just killed everybody. Actually, I read one of the worst. I read the What If the X-Men Had Lost Inferno. Did you get a chance to read that common? Wolverine eats a baby in that one. So, they feed him. He likes, how the demons like, they talk about the whole thing, eating babies. And that's the other thing with exterminators. It's like, hey, here's a teenage girl in her underwear. Here's some demons that want to eat babies.
Yeah.
Let's make some, random juvenile jokes about a Pepsi can or whatever. Like, it was kind of all over the place and not quality comic there, X-Men. But Exterminators, if we cross that off, this will raise about 3 points. So
Yeah, even in the
that's
Exterminators, remember at the Exterminators, the demons are so stupid, they don't know what a baby is. So
yes.
Nastor is explaining to them, all right, so they're like shorter people and they have big eyes. So the demons are like, oh, Artie and Leech, let's go
Right.
get them. And then they get them and they make these little straw dolls and put them in their bed to like trick the people at the medical facility. Like what? It's so juvenile. It's so silly.
I really think they were taken off on the goblins from Labyrinth. I
Mhm.
really feel like that's what was being drawn from for the demons.
Interesting.
Sadly. And I would like to point out that Taki helped facilitate the murder of 13 babies to save 2 of his friends. I just want to point that out. Like he's not a good person. Taki is he's a bad human being. It's not just he's a bad written character and he has stupid superpowers. He's a bad human being, period. So
They
I
saved all those babies.
I
man. They
hope
saved them.
Decimation took him out and he never came back. That's all I'm saying.
Back.
You don't think he was wheeling around on Krakoa at
No,
all, or do
he
we get
is.
any sightings?
He is.
Did we get
He's
any
on
sightings?
Krakoa.
Yes.
Yes, he's there. He even was in the animated series.
What was his Hellfire Gala outfit? I wonder.
Oh, I feel like we're treading in rough territory now, John. Yeah, he was
all
on
right.
that episode with Cyclops when he goes to that town, Costa Mesa. He's he's wheeling around at the orphanage when Cyclops goes back to the orphanage and has to fight
That makes
Purple
sense. Okay. Yeah.
Whiz Kid.
Whiz Kid.
Whiz Kid, Rusty, Boom Boom, and Skids. Ooh, those are some
What a
rough
lineup.
names for a kid.
Yeah.
It'll be the next show on Disney Plus. Watch because it's got the teenagers.
I just want to
But
say that
it
all of
was
those-
very
wait,
diverse.
wait
you know?
for it. Every one of those names can describe my underwear as a 13-year-old. Those just
Oh,
I mean,
Straight to the gutter.
that's not true, but it could be. It could be rusty skids for sure.
boom, boom.
Yes,
Yep. And it comes back to you when you get older too.
Yeah. right. Yeah, that's true.
That's a good
I hope
full,
we don't
full
have to
circle
have to-
moment.
I hope we never have to see Boom Boom again too much, just because of like everybody's like, what using those power pellets right there? I'm like, or just like she'd always use her power in the most like people like, no, not here. Boom, 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 you know, whatever. I kind
Boom
of
Boom, I feel it's just
she was
blonde Jubilee.
she was appropriately written in Next Wave. That was if you want to read a really good story with her as actually a decent character, read Next Wave.
I guess I'll have to reread it. I forgot that she was in it. Is she one of the main characters of that, or is
Yeah.
she just? Is
Yeah,
she
she's part of the team with
Machine Man? and,
Elsa
Captain Marvel?
Bloodstone, Captain, the original or my
Olaf.
Captain Marvel.
Monica.
Yeah.
Mhm.
By the way, we're in the hat of my favorite movie, guys. Let's just see.
Excellent.
And Machine Man. Who else is on that team? The Captain.
But the captain was just made for that, right? Am I supposed to know who he is?
Is that Dirk
No,
Angler?
Yeah, Dark Angler
Yeah.
was the he headed up Hate. Yeah.
Right. All was in Next Wave, but I've never seen that character outside of that series, have I?
Well, it was supposed to be Nick Fury, but editorial the way Warren Ellis wrote Dark Anger, they didn't want Nick Fury written that way. So
Gotcha.
he
Gotcha.
had to make up a new character. A suicidal man with mommy issues. They didn't want Nick Fury being that character.
Very good. All right. Well, that's X-Men Inferno in a nutshell.
Yeah, read Next Wave instead. That's my opinion.
That's your. What book do you recommend instead of X-Men Inferno? We'll go around the table. But I'd say Daredevil Born Again, but that's just me. But that's one more story. Maybe next time, right, Darren?
what's coming next. All right, well, that's everything. Thank you all for joining us. Make sure you follow the M6P on all the things, Facebook, YouTube, etc. We have a website too. Make sure you follow Hydro Man, Mr. Optophobic down here on his YouTube channel. And Jared?
Until next time, make yours the M6P.